I'd like to begin by acknowledging the traditional custodians of the land on which I live and work, the Yuwut and Whadjuk people of the Noongar Nation. I pay my respects to their elders, past, present, and emerging, and extend that respect to all First Nations, including Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders who may be watching today's episode.
For me, I think living in alignment, or rather not living in contradiction to my own values, was the best thing I could do for my own mental health. I've always been quite a fit, athletic, sporty person. My genuine beliefs were this is going to be bad for my health. It's not buying meat, it's not buying eggs, it's not buying dairy or honey. You're buying oppression, violence, slavery, and violation of body autonomy. These are the things that I would hope that most people would want less of in the world. We don't want a violent world, we don't want an oppressive world, we don't want a discriminatory world.
Welcome to Shit Sparked, the podcast that gets real about addiction, mental health, and everything in between. I'm Paris, and I spent 17 years battling the bottle, 10 years hooked on meth, and I also did a stint in the escorting world, which nearly cost me everything, including my life. With both lived and professional experience, including qualifications in alcohol and other drugs, I'm here to share what I've learned along the way. Every journey is unique, and this podcast brings you stories, insights, and practical tools to help you find what works for you. Now, just a disclaimer, we dive into some tough topics here, including addiction, all forms of abuse, trauma, mental illness, suicide, self-harm, and the realities of life in recovery. These discussions can be intense, so please take care while listening and just make sure you're in the right headspace too. Don't forget to follow or subscribe to the podcast. Your support actually helps us more than you know, and it's one of the best ways to keep these conversations going. I hope you enjoy the show. And welcome to the show, Stefan. Thank you so much for joining us today.
It's so lovely to be here with you, Paris. Thank you for inviting me onto your podcast.
Yes, this is actually, so for our listeners out there, this is the second time that we've recorded an episode. Stefan was actually the very first person that I wanted to make an episode with, but because I was so amateur at podcasting then, the quality of that episode, unfortunately, was unwatchable. It was just distorted. It was fully pixelated. And I had a lot of tech things I had to work on after that. So thank you, Stefan, for starting my journey here.
It's good to be back for round two. Let's give it a go.
Let's give it another crack, all right? So can you tell us a bit about your background and what led you to become an advocate for veganism?
Yep, so I'm 36 years old. I was not vegan for 30 years, and I think the way I was raised was probably the way that most people listening to this were raised. I was raised here in Perth, Australia, and my family background is Italian. And the reason why I'm mentioning that is everyone would have their own form of cultural identity that they were raised with, and a lot of that culture is obviously things like music and tradition and clothing, and also food. And like most people, a Christmas without a Christmas ham wasn't Christmas. And for other people around the world, Thanksgiving without a turkey is not Thanksgiving. And Australia Day without a lamb on the barbie is not Australia Day. So we all have a lot of these kind of cultural stories that we were all growing up with, and I was no different. And I was someone who probably wasn't meat heavy, but I certainly couldn't comprehend, I should say, a life without animal products in terms of consuming animal products. I absolutely loved everything that this kind of upbringing gave me, the social factors, the taste, the cultures, the traditions. And obviously I had these stories around why I was having them. And I suppose because they were normal, natural, and kind of necessary, that's why I didn't really challenge that. I guess to share a bit of the story as to what helped that transition or change in my lifestyle. I don't need to go into too much detail, but it was a unhealthy relationship. As a consequence of that, I started reevaluating a lot of questions in my life. I started questioning a lot of areas. And like most people, not most people, I did a 10-day Vipassana, which is a 10-day silent retreat where you meditate for 12 hours a day for 10 days straight. and you're not meant to be in your head, you're meant to be in your body. But I was asking a lot of questions. And one of the questions I asked myself was, why am I patting dogs? Why am I loving dogs? Why am I welcoming dogs into my heart and my home and eating pigs and cows and chickens? And I couldn't come up with an answer that justified this discrepancy. And I'd always been priding myself on being a morally and logically consistent person. And I couldn't come up with a reason that kind of justified this discrepancy of loving and being kind and respectful to some animals and species of animals, and paying for others to be, bred and exploited and caged and killed and then eating their bodies. And I couldn't come up with a reason why I wouldn't want my dog, for example, to go through any of those kind of experiences. So I guess I started thinking about things not from my point of view, not from my perspective, but from the victim's point of view. How it would feel, not how I feel about eating animals, but how it must feel to be the animal being kind of bred and exploited and killed in horrible ways. And I guess I started thinking about, animals being innocent, them doing nothing wrong to me, and me kind of imparting with money. I had money and I could decide the fate of another individual just with a seemingly trivial and simple transaction. I could force an animal into an existence that I would never want to be in myself. And I suppose now normal for me is leaving animals alone, respecting them and letting them be free. And the reason why I became an advocate, an animal rights activist, and that kind of thing is because I wish I knew about this sooner. I wish it's something that I was spoken to sooner, so that I could appreciate the consequences of my choices a lot sooner. And animals, unfortunately, don't have a voice. They're trapped away in cages and farms and slaughterhouses, and they don't have a voice. They can scream, but most people who buy animal products, of course, are hidden from this reality. And that's why I'm so passionately speaking about it, because I've visited a lot of these facilities, and I think that it's my obligation or responsibility to speak up for victims who cannot speak for themselves. So, ultimately, I thought it was unfair for me to place innocent animals, particularly, into positions that I would never want to be in myself. And that's why I felt a strong kind of compulsion to speak about animal rights.
Thank you for sharing that. That was beautifully said. And the reason, Stefan, that I have you on today to talk about such a topic is because for me, like I'm not vegan. I wouldn't classify myself as vegan. However, I'm in the same boat that you once were, where you started questioning things, where you started thinking about, is this right? Is this fair? And for me, been on a recovery journey for so long with addiction and my mental health challenges, there's a lot of things like you start to look at. So for you, your kind of breaking into that world, I should say, was, going through a relationship breakup and then having to reevaluate everything. So I feel like I've kind of gone through the similar stages in starting to reevaluate, look at where my life is, who do I want to be, what is this world that I'm living in, and just really questioning lots of questions. And so now I'm at that point where I'm very open to learning more. I'm starting to see the cracks, and now it's getting harder and harder to ignore. So for me, I've really restricted how much animal products I have in my life. There are still some. There are still some. So like chicken and fish, that's still in my diet, but everything else has pretty much gone. Like no more dairy, no more red meat, things like that. But I'm at that point where I'm like, I feel like I'm holding on to chicken and fish for pleasure reasons, like I enjoy it. Like, and I'm really feeling guilty about it. I'm feeling really, really terrible about it because I was like, this is so self-indulgent, like really starting to get into my head about it lately. And I just can't ignore it. Like I really can't ignore it. It's getting louder and louder for me. So I'm grateful to have you on here to start having this conversation, because I think it's important that we do stop and question things. Like I don't like the way that the systems are running, like anywhere in the world at
There's
the
a lot
moment.
of
Like
things. Yeah. And
the
what you just
world
said
is
is,
so up.
and what you just said about what you're experiencing, that's something that probably every vegan has gone through, that period of thinking, why am I doing this? Am I doing this for pleasure? And it's something that I went through as well. So I can completely relate to where you're at. Just a brief back on my story. I went vegetarian first. I forgot to mention that. So I went vegetarian first because I genuinely thought that I was living in alignment with my values. I'm like, great, no animals are dying for me anymore. I'm vegetarian and that's aligned with my values. But I didn't understand what veganism actually was. And I think it's probably important that we define what being vegan is,
Absolutely.
which we didn't do. So veganism isn't a diet. It's more of it's just saying that animals should be free. We have no right to commodify, exploit animals and see them as resources. So it's a mentality about not just diet, it's about clothing, furniture, entertainment, testing. So horse racing, dog racing, anything that views animals as products, commodities, and resources. And that, in my opinion, and vegans' opinions, is violating the body autonomy of animals. We talk about consent being things like my body, my choice, but then we look at animals and we say their body, my choice. And I don't think that we should have the rights to violate the rights of others. And when you view it from a different perspective, which is now how I view it, it's not buying meat, it's not buying eggs, it's not buying dairy or honey. You're buying oppression, violence, slavery, and violation of body autonomy. And these are the things that I would hope that most people would want less of in the world. We don't want a violent world. We don't want an oppressive world. We don't want a discriminatory world. But unfortunately, when we buy animal products, we are paying for violence, oppression, slavery, and all of these things. And that's where I felt like I was being incongruently living with misalignment with my own values, where I was paying for things that I was intrinsically against. And I guess the ultimate question I asked myself was, would I willingly want to trade places and be seen as a product, commodity, resource, and slave? And the answer is no for me. I think it's unfair for me to place those kind of restrictions and impositions on particularly innocent others.
Absolutely. And thank you for clarifying that, because I think that's important. Like it's more than just diet. Absolutely. And that's something, again, that I've been thinking about too. Like I'd already stopped going and paying money for entertainment of animals, like whether that's going to the zoo or, even overseas, like in Bali, there's a lot of like animal interactions that you can pay for, which I never engage with. Things like that. But there's just so much, like clothing, as you mentioned, furniture, like it's everywhere. It's everywhere.
Yep.
And sometimes I catch myself like thinking, I don't know why, but I particularly go to pigs. And I'll think about how they must be feeling like when they're about to be slaughtered, and just like the fear. You can see the fear in their faces, and it's horrendous. And I just put myself in that pig's shoes, and I'm like, oh my God, they must be terrified. Like, this is horrible. Like, why are we doing this? And I don't know. I just ended up going down a rabbit hole.
I will just say that pigs were my first connection as well. That's why. Sorry, I actually lied what I said earlier. I went pescatarian first before I went vegetarian. So I couldn't. So I forgot to mention that I couldn't connect to fish at the start, and I always, like you as well, chickens were the last of my meat to be like chickens. Like, so even with my mindset, I still had a hierarchy in the transition phase. So I did go pescat. So I went, chickens were the last ones to stop because I thought they were the least worthy of my consideration, and then fish after that, because fish are always an afterthought. But pigs were definitely my first connection. They're literally just dogs in pink skin. And what a lot of people might know, this is actually scientifically proven, pigs are more intelligent than dogs. So they're more social creatures. They're smarter than dogs. So this is what I find interesting, is people who call themselves animal lovers, who generally just mean pet lovers and cat lovers and dog lovers and dolphin lovers, is that these animals that they're paying to become bacon, they're reducing these beautiful animals to words like bacon and ham and pork. So these beautiful individuals, we're seeing them just as flesh and objects. And I will share one thing, and I'll be going there again in a week or so, is I've been to the pig slaughterhouse an hour outside of Perth. It's called Lindley Valley. And you see these trucks come in and you look at these cutest nose, these beautiful squishy noses, and you look at all of the pigs in this truck. And the sad thing about it is this is the first time these pigs have seen the sunlight. A lot of, I'd say 90 to 95% of pigs in Australia, and probably worldwide as well, are in very confined cages. They sleep on metal flooring. They often cover themselves in their own feces. Probably one of the best confronting websites, which we can maybe share later, is called the Farm Transparency Project. They're an organisation based in Melbourne. They visit slaughterhouses and farms all around Australia, exposing illegally. So it's obviously illegal to expose and enter these farms, but they show real raw footage of what happens. So when I visited Lindley Valley, you just see all of these beautiful pigs. You look in their eyes, you look at their squishy noses, and some are defeated, some are excited to see you, some are confused, a lot are scared. And then the truck drives in and you see the truck driver kicking them off the truck and you hear them squealing and screaming. Yeah, pigs were definitely my first connection because there's really no difference between a dog and a pig except the skin they're in. And as I mentioned before, a lot of people, myself included, before I was vegan, if I was confronted with the question, are you against discrimination? I would have said, of course I'm against discrimination. Discrimination is horrible. But here I was patting a dog and eating a pig. And I think that is the most vile form of discrimination because we are judging the worth and rights of a body just because of the body they're born into. And we can obviously think of many instances in human context where we're discriminating against people of different color, ethnicities, even male and female. And yeah, this whole discrimination thing, and that's why I focus on animal rights as well, because if we can see the value in something that we've been taught to not see the value in, like a chicken or a fish or a pig or a cow, hopefully that works its way up into all life and respecting all life.
It just that was hurting my heart, even just listening to that, because I looked at the website, the one that you mentioned. Yep. You first sent it to me right before we were first organizing this episode, and I did have a look at some of the pig farms, and I almost was sick. I've
never cried. I've genuinely, when I went the first time to Lindley Valley, I got home and it's the hardest I've ever cried in my life. Because I suppose for two reasons. One, it was because I realized that I'd been doing that for 30 years, that I had been doing that to beautiful animals for 30 years. And I cried because I saw them. I took photos, I took videos, and 6 hours later, they were going to be in a gas chamber. And that really broke me. And I cried for a few hours and I couldn't move. I'll be putting myself through that again next week. I like to go, don't like to go, but I go once a year, because I think it's important to take videos and photos and share the message, and I'll probably have a horrible day. I'm even feeling really upset about it now, thinking about next week, but it's something that I feel I need to do.
Yeah, and I think it's important too because we are so disconnected from it. I mean, from the whole point of, we're not seeing the slaughter, we're not a part of the slaughter, as they say. We just see the products on the shelf.
We see bacon, ham in a plastic container. We just see bacon and ham and pork, and we pass the butcher. And I explained this the other day to a few people. We walk through the supermarket and the butcher, and there's just chopped up dead bodies, and no one.
That's what I think. Every time I walk through,
it's just this flesh, and it's like if they were chopped up dogs or chopped up humans or chopped up cats, people would be losing their minds.
Different reactions, yeah.
But we just see these body parts. And it's normal. And it's just, I see this side of it now. I see violence and horrible things. I don't see meat anymore. I see these beautiful animals who have just been violated and gone through the most horrible existence. And we just, honestly, people might not like the language, but it's quite objective. We literally just pass chopped up dead body parts every day. And it's just crazy that we've been immune to this kind of lens. We see this complete lens of just seeing a product rather than a beautiful individual.
I agree. And I'm having the same experience now when I go through the supermarkets, and I can't actually even go near that section
I don't go.
anymore.
I go through it once a year just to maybe take a photo and then make a comment about it. But yeah, I literally go fruit and veg, and I go to the whole food place. But yeah, so yeah, I don't go there anymore. I don't want to put myself through that. But yeah,
it's horrendous, and like obviously, we talk a lot about animal cruelty, and how there's such a different variation or different lenses for that. But I wanted to also talk about the other side of having like a vegan approach within your diet, and I guess how that can help us physically and mentally as well. I wanted to dive into that too, because that was an aspect as well that I found really interesting. I found there was really some great documentaries on Netflix that went through just how a plant-based diet can impact our physical health in such a good way, particularly for sport. This was when I was playing like amateur AFL. I was like,
yeah.
okay, like really, really interesting. It's really good to know that, sometimes having a plant-based diet could mean faster recovery times, and you can actually, there's just a lot more benefits. You can hold energy for longer, extra, like all these extra things.
Yep.
So how do you believe a plant-based diet can support mental health? Like, can food choices really alter brain chemistry in a way that impacts mental clarity and mood?
Yep. So I'll answer that with what I thought before I went vegan or plant-based. I was typically minded for most people, and that is that meat products or animal products are necessary. We see the food pyramid, and right in the middle there is meat, egg, and dairy. And obviously that has a lot of subconscious beliefs, and I think they ran deep within myself as well, where I've always been quite a fit, athletic, sporty person. And my genuine belief was I'm going to get less strong, less fit, and I'm going to get more sick. So my genuine beliefs were this is going to be bad for my health, but I'm going to do it anyway because I don't want to contribute to this system. But now to kind of answer your question, I think it's probably important to disclose that I'm not a nutritionist. I think that's really important to say that I have not studied nutrition from a institutional perspective. But my background is I'm a podiatrist, so I went to uni, and as a part of the course, we did learn to read literature, understand the hierarchy of evidence behind literature in terms of, anecdotes being the lowest, and then you get randomized control studies and meta-analyses higher than that. So there is a hierarchy of evidence. I would say there's people that I follow, and I know that this is a dangerous word to say, there's influencers that I follow, but there's people who I believe to be very objective analyzers of the literature. One of the guys is, I've got the book here. I don't know if it's backwards or forwards. It might be backwards.
No, it's forward.
It's forwards, great. So his name is Simon Hill. He was a physiotherapist. Then he got curious in nutrition. And I'll mention some other names as well, but this book is called Proof is in the Plants. His story was his dad had a major heart attack, and then he wanted to work out ways in which he could reduce that risk. He then studied nutrition science, and although he himself is 100% plant-based, that's my understanding, he still mentions objectively what level of animal products would be safe in terms of nutritionally safe, and then what threshold would be unsafe. So although he is 100% plant-based, this is what I like about him. Although he is 100% plant-based, he still actually says this amount of animal products is a healthy amount, which showing that he's not letting his bias get into impact with his objective analysis. He has this book, which I highly recommend. He also has a website and a podcast called The Proof is in the Plants. And I just think he's a really good, well-balanced, objective analyzer of the literature. Another one is Dr. Bill Bolshewitz. He's a gut microbiome specialist. And then there's also Dr. Matthew Nagra, Dr. Neil Bernard, and Dr. Michael Greger. I think they're all very good resources. Now, to answer the question, to my best knowledge of listening to these guys and also doing my own diving and things like that, I think it's important to differentiate. You said, like, what can help mood, mental clarity, things like that. I think a lot of the problem is just saying whole foods in general are really good. There's obviously a lot of processed foods. So I think shifting to a whole food diet, whether it's plants or meat or animal-based, whole foods are always going to be better than ultra-processed foods. Ultra-processed foods are things that are highly palatable. They're high in sodium, they're low in fiber, they're high in sugar. So replacing these foods is always going to be healthier. And that's where a lot of studies will say, eating meat is healthier because they've replaced these ultra-processed foods. So it's comparing to what? So I think it's important to differentiate. You use the word plant-based diet. I think it's important to differentiate plant-based diet versus whole food plant-based diet. Because obviously plant-based diets can be eating chips and crisps and Doritos and that kind of stuff. So I'm not going to say that a plant-based diet is healthy. So you can do an unhealthy plant-based diet. So plant-based diets aren't healthy just in general, but if you do a whole food plant-based diet, they're going to be very healthy. Nuts, seeds, fruits, vegetables, beans, legumes, chickpeas, things like that, whole grains. So you're talking about mood and clarity. There's actually, I'm going to mention studies that go in both directions. I'm going to read some notes because I wrote some. There was a study that actually showed an increased association between vegetarian and vegan diets and depression. Now, I will mention the flaws of this study, and this is something that Simon and also Dr. Matthew Nagra spoke about as well, is this was a poorly designed study that was a cross-sectional study. What that means cross-sectional is they just look at vegans and vegetarians compared to omnivorous people, and they showed that in the vegan and vegetarian groups, the rates of depression were actually higher, which is against what you've just said. But the problem with cross-sectional studies is they don't show what caused what. Was it a vegan and vegetarian diet that caused depression, or was it a depression that made people, for example, change their diet? And I think that that's what it goes to. I can even feel that sometimes I wouldn't say I have depression, but I feel sad, I feel depressed when I think about injustices. And maybe it is so that people who go vegetarian and vegan are people who are concerned about ethical matters and potentially have mental health problems as association of connecting with injustices and things like that. So that's one study that goes that way, but then there's plenty of other studies. I'd say it's about a 3 or 4 to 1 ratio of positive effects to vegan and vegetarian diets rather than negative. But one of them particularly showed that diets higher in fruits, vegetables, nuts, and seeds improved depression and anxiety scores, and that was a longitudinal study, which meant it followed people over time. Another one showed that one showed an increase in plants, the other one showed a restriction of meat, fish, and poultry in omnivores improved mood, and this was a pilot randomized control study. Another study showed that a diet higher in fruits, vegetables, and berries creates higher blood flow to the brain. And of course, when I'm making an assumption that helps with mood and clarity, higher blood flow, higher mood and clarity, they obviously didn't study mood and clarity, but by eating more fruits, vegetables, and berries, there was a higher blood flow in the brain. So that's when it comes to brain-based studies. Now, to talk about the gut specifically, obviously, I'm sure a lot of people have heard that the gut is the number one gateway to health or ill health. I think it was Socrates or one of those people said that all diseases originate from the gut. It's important to know that 90% of the body's serotonin is actually released in the gut. And serotonin is the hormone responsible for regulating mood and sleep and appetite and overall mental health. But it is important to note that the serotonin released from the gut does not pass the blood-brain barrier. So it doesn't actually, so it's a bit devious for me to say that, it releases all this serotonin, which are all the good hormones. That actually doesn't cross the brain, is my understanding. But it does connect with the nerves that then connect with the brain. So I'd be very confident to say that the serotonin release is not going to have a negative effect on the body anyway. The last few things I want to say, and I would highly, as I mentioned, recommend reading this book and listening to his podcast. He speaks a lot about higher plant diversity, and what they're saying is you should be having 30 to 40 plus different plants every week, and your gut microbiome will be healthier. And one of the most kind of unsung heroes is fiber. Now, a lot of people say fiber is indigestible by us, and that is true. We cannot digest insoluble fiber, but the little guys in our gut do, and they release a whole cascade of health-promoting short-chain fatty acids. And I've written a few of the benefits here. They do things, they're anti-inflammatory, they're immune-regulating, they're anti-obesity, anti-diabetes, anti-cancer, cardioprotective, so they help our heart. I actually listened to a recent podcast by William Bolshevitz, who was the gut microbiome specialist I spoke about earlier. And the way he describes it is ecosystems in general, like when we look at forests and rainforests, the more diversity we have, the healthier the rainforest, the healthier the system in general. And it's no different to our gut as well. And people might think that by eliminating things like meat, egg, and dairy, we're having less diversity, but they show people with higher plant-based diets have higher gut diversity. And the interesting thing they showed was people who have higher gut microbiome diversity do better with cancer treatment. So you're more likely to have better recovery or better cancer outcomes the higher your gut microbiome diversity. And the best way to do that is by eating more fiber and eating higher diversity of plants. For me, I think living in alignment, or rather not living in contradiction to my own values, was the best thing I could do for my own mental health. Living in that world of I know this is wrong, but I'm still doing it kind of world. I was in that for a very short period amount of time, and I don't think there's anything. So if this puts you on you directly, but for me, I don't think of anything worse I can do for myself than to do something that I know is wrong and do something against my own heart and own knowledge. It's like, I know this is wrong, but I'm doing it. And I think lying to ourselves, particularly when there's victims and consequences of our lying, I think that's something that I couldn't personally live with anymore.
Thank you so much for that, Stefan. And all good, all good.
Yeah, all good.
I love the transparency. No, it's good. And look, these are hard truths. We're having a conversation today about some real hard truths. It's uncomfortable conversations for a lot of people, but this is why I have this platform. I want to be able to have these kinds of conversations. You know, we don't grow by being comfortable, right?
We need to be challenged, and I always like to receive the level of challenging that I give out. I like to hold myself accountable. I like others to hold me accountable as well. If I feel like I'm doing a wrong as well, I'm very open. I don't think I'm single lensed in that kind of domain.
Yeah. Oh, and I'm the same. Always open to constructive criticism. That's all good.
Yep.
All good. But what I was going to say, I really like that you touched on fiber and the microbiomes, because I actually recently had an episode released. Well, it will be by the time this has dropped. Released about the gut, and I was talking to a doctor that specializes in microbiome, and that was exactly what she said. Her name was Dr. Angela Giannoni, and she's based in Perth. She did say exactly that. She said the fiber and the varieties of fiber is what makes the healthiest gut, and the healthiest microbiome. So as soon as you touched on that, because I was going to bring it up, and then you went into it, and I was like,
And an interesting thing about this is just an interesting statistic. A lot of people say things like, vegans, where do you get your protein from, kind of thing. The biggest deficiency, I think it's in America, 95% of Americans are not getting enough fiber.
Yeah, same with Australia. That's what Dr. Giannoni
said. I'm guessing
as well.
Australia and America would probably be quite similar, so it makes sense. But I know that, so people are saying vegans are deficient in this. But 95% of the population is not getting anywhere near enough fiber. And one other little thing I'll say about fiber in terms of this, just a bit of a hack about increasing it. If you typically, and again, both Simon and Dr. Matthew Nagra speak about this as well, if you are low in fiber, the worst thing you can do is just go from 0 to 100 in a day. The best way to increase that'll actually increase your gut inflammation. The best thing to do is eat fermented foods and go from, it's almost like going to the gym and trying to lift 200 kilos on day one. You're going to hurt yourself. Start with 5 kilos, go to 10 kilos, go to 15 kilos. The same thing is with fiber. Don't go from, if you're a low fiber diet, the worst thing you can do is say, I heard fiber was great. I'm going to eat a ton of fiber today. That will honestly destroy your gut. And the best way to increase your fiber is to eat it with fermented foods and treat it like going to the gym. Start with 5 grams a day, go to 10 grams a day. Don't try and lift 60 grams of fiber a day. You will hurt your body. And that's where a lot of people go wrong, is they say, I tried the fiber thing. I got bloated. I got all these problems. Start with fermented foods. Start by increasing fiber gradually. And they actually did a study on this to show that is definitely the methodology to do it. So if there is a takeaway, definitely eat more fiber, but
gradual process. Yeah. And that's exactly what Dr. Giannoni said as well. She was very clear on that. She was like, I don't ask people to, suddenly switch their diets totally around. But no, really important thing to note. So with all the hormones and chemicals now found in meat and all of our products, let's be honest, do you think we're really gaining health benefits from consuming animal products? Like, how does the modern food system impact both our physical and mental well-being?
Yeah. So I think, like what we touched on earlier about, being clean in our diets, there's a problem. I don't want to be biased and say, oh, there's no problems with plant-based foods. There is definitely problems with the way that agriculture is doing plant-based foods. So I don't want to, although I have a bias to plant-based foods, I should say, to be objective and to be a realist, there's herbicides, pesticides, the way that we need to scale foods. The whole system is broken. Obviously, with animals, this is the problem. A lot of people think animals are all free range. We drive down the highway, we see cows and sheep in open fields, and we think, oh, that's how animals are raised. 90 to 95% are in intensive factory farmed conditions where they're in very strong confinement. And obviously, because of that confinement, there's high risks of viral infections. They need to be pumped with antibiotics, as you mentioned. They're pumped with hormones to make them grow quicker. Obviously, and even plant-based foods, they're genetically modified as well. So the whole system is broke. A lot of plants are genetically modified to be resistant to certain, insects and things like that. But the thing is, a lot of these genetically modified crops, for example, are then fed to the animals that we eat. So you're still going to get them no matter what you do. But as I mentioned, like animals are bred to be, they're genetically modified. So chickens, for example, are about 3 or 4 times bigger than they used to be 40 years ago. And that's because
I didn't actually know that.
Yeah, so what actually happens with chickens, they're at slaughter weight at 42 days old. It's 6 weeks. So they're only 6 weeks old, chickens, when they're killed. And they're so heavy, they get so big, so heavy that they get organ failure. Their legs break because they get so big so quickly. And cows, for example, that make dairy, I don't know the exact number, so I'm making numbers up. So don't quote me on the numbers. But let's just say if a cow is only meant to make 10 litres of milk a day, they make 60 litres of milk a day. So that puts a lot of stress on their udders and their bodies to produce so much milk. And a lot of animals in general are genetically modified to grow quicker or grow more meat, And if we were to use that context in other examples, we could genetically modify dogs to make more meat so that we can kill and eat them for meat. So to answer your question, the whole system is broken in terms of genetically modified herbicides, pesticides, vaccines, antibiotics. But what I will say is people think that, crops are the problem, things like that. But the reason why most crops are grown is for animal feed. There's only 8 billion humans, but there's 80 billion land animals killed every year. So we need to grow. The reason why we need to grow so many crops, and the reason why, therefore, we need more herbicides and pesticides is because we need to feed 80 billion land animals. The problem is that, a lot of these problems are because of animal agriculture. And things like E. coli, people will talk about E. coli being on things like lettuce and cabbage and kale and things like that. E. coli comes from fecal matter, from waste. So a lot of these problems that we have in plant-based foods is because of waste from animals that then gets into our plant-based systems. So there's one other thing I'll share is in terms of looking at health outcome data, there's 2 things I want to mention. One is obviously, I'm not sure if people have heard of the blue zones, but they're areas around the world where they have the most healthy centenarians, that is people who live healthily above 100 years old. And the thing that they all share in common is 90 to 100% of their diet is plant-based. And as I mentioned, whole food plant-based. They have a lot of beans, legumes, chickpeas, fruits, vegetables, things like that. There is one study that I just want to mention. And so this is just comparing plant protein versus animal protein in terms of health outcome data. And this is probably one of the best studies I've come across. Simon Hill is who I learned about this from, and he actually does a YouTube video that describes and breaks down the study really well. But the study is called Dietary Protein Intake in Midlife in Relation to Healthy Aging, Results from the Prospective Nurses Healthy Study Cohort. Now, the reason why I really like this study is it involved 50,000 people aged under 60, and it was done in 1984, and it had a 30-year follow-up. So what they actually did was they took total protein, animal protein, dairy protein, which was a subset of animal protein, and plant protein. And what they did is they did validated food questionnaires, which I think they followed each person up. I think it was every 3 or 4 years, because obviously diets can change. They didn't want to just assume a diet from year 1 and assume they did it for 30 years. And they defined healthy aging as being free from 11 major chronic diseases, having good mental health, and not having impairments in either cognitive or physical function. Animal protein was associated with increased odds of developing one or more of the 11 chronic diseases outlined in the study. And this was the very interesting thing, replacing 3% of energy from animal protein with plant protein increased one's odds of healthy aging by 38%. So just by changing 3% of your calories from animal-based proteins to plant-based proteins, increased your odds of healthy aging by 38%. That's just 3% of calories.
That's nuts.
And then animal proteins and plant proteins were both associated with not having physical limitations. But while animal proteins increase someone's odds of not being physically limited by 5%, dairy proteins did by 8%, but plant proteins by 41%. So the odds of having physical limitations was 41% better with plant proteins and only 5% better with animal proteins.
Wow.
That's saying that if you met the minimum age. So this study is brilliant. It shows just by changing meat proteins or animal-based proteins to plant, your mental health, chronic disease, and physical health will all be better. I mentioned earlier how we've all got the food pyramid idea. And a lot of people say that, there's a problem with the food pyramid because look at all the unhealthy people in America and Australia, for example. It's not a problem with the food pyramid per se, and I'll explain that in a second. It's adherence to the food pyramid. So a lot of people say that, the food pyramid must be bad because look at all the unhealthy people. But I think only about 5 or 10% people adhere to the food pyramid.
Absolutely.
And that's because obviously there's social factors, there's marketing, there's colourful packaging, there's ultra-processed foods, and that's why we're losing our connection with health food. So a lot of studies that will say that, if you eat good meat, of course your health will improve. It will. But compared to unhealthy foods, so the same benefits that you get from going from ultra-processed to a healthy meat-based diet, that is better, but going whole food plant-based will definitely improve it better. The Danish dietary guidelines are the first national guidelines that actually really strongly promote a preference to whole food plant-based diets. They actually say have plant-rich foods varied, so they're saying lots of variation. Eat less meat, choose beans and legumes in preference to meat. Eat whole grains, and then eat less sweet, salty, and fatty foods.
Thank you so much for sharing. That was very insightful. And I feel nauseous. And I know why. It's because I think the biggest takeaway, even though there was a lot of amazing information in that, the biggest takeaway that I got was actually what you talked about, like with the chicken. I didn't realize that they were only 6 months old. And I am now just feeling so
they're little babies.
Down.
And other things as well, like pigs, as we'll mention, as pigs are, again, I would say the same as dogs. They're killed between 4 to 6 months old. So they're literally puppies. And we can imagine sending dogs to slaughter at 4 to 6 months old, and these pigs are literally 4 to 6 months old. And that's when they're put in a gas chamber. And it's just, and I find this so bizarre where, if I was to claim that I put dogs in gas chambers, I would be on the front page of the news. I would be unfriended by everyone I know. They would call me the most horrible person in the world if I put one dog in a gas chamber. But this particular facility that I mentioned outside of Perth, they do 5,000 pigs a week. And it doesn't get any media attention. They're not bad people. They're doing good work. And it's just so bizarre that they're literally putting 3 to 6 month baby puppy pigs in gas chambers, which is just horrible.
Absolutely. And honestly, it's making me feel ill. And it's just, again, making me feel like I'm not in alignment with my values. And I can feel the physical effects of that right now.
And I'm always here to help people as well, because I understand this is what a lot of people have to appreciate is a lot of the feelings that a lot of people are feeling, if they are listening to this, is I went through all these feelings too. So all of these, I can't do it because of this, but I like this, but I do this. Trust me, every reason that you have that you can't do this, I want to make it very clear. I loved eating animal products. Cheese, I loved it. Bacon, I loved it. Chicken, Nando's, I loved it. I loved eating animal products. I absolutely loved it. So I didn't want to give up something that I love doing. Why would anyone want to give up something that gives them joy and pleasure and all that kind of stuff? And I do a lot of street outreach. I can almost assure you there's nothing that is going through your mind that I haven't wanted to justify doing this for, because I did not want to give this up. I promise you, I loved eating animal products. And I can even say as a vegan, animal products taste great. But that doesn't justify causing harm
What's
to innocent.
happening?
Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
absolutely.
Yeah.
All right, listen up, legends. If you're looking to experience the real Western Australia, there's no better way than with Why Not Bus, who is one of our sponsors. I've actually been on their tour, and let me tell you, it is awesome vibes, epic adventures, and I made lifelong friends. We're talking snorkeling with sea lions, manta rays, whale sharks, camping under the stars, and taking your time to enjoy the beauty of WA. Use my discount code PARIS2025 and get $300 off your next tour. Go to www.whynotbus.com.au.
So good on you. You'll get there. And I'm always here for you, and anyone listening, I'm always here for you.
I've got a dinner tonight too, and I'm cooking. So I was like, you know what? I'm going to make a vegan meal tonight because I feel ill. Yeah. I don't like it. Like, I hate this. It's making me feel... I just feel sad. Like, I feel like on the verge of tears. Like, and I just feel sick in my stomach. I just feel like my whole body is reacting to this conversation. And like, this is another question I'm going to slip in there. But something that I often think about is, and usually it's in question to myself, but I also think about, why are people so resistant to, I guess, when you see a lot of vegan advocates, I mean, there are some people that are very like hardcore with it, definitely get in your face and can make it pretty uncomfortable. But why do you think like we do have such a resistance to this messaging? Like what do you think that is?
Yeah, it's just bizarre because all we're saying is, hey, do you like animals? Do you think animals deserve kindness or violence? So it's a pretty reasonable thing we're asking. Do you think we should just be kind to animals? But it is that statement is just led with so much resistance. It's for a lot of reasons. There's a lot of it's social factors is the biggest one. Because again, there is this association of vegans being preachy and judgmental. It's like, why would I want to be this person? People don't. Yeah. I think there's an optics problem of what veganism is. People think, vegans are just these judgmental people who yell and scream at others. And why would I want to be that? There's also a lot of other identities. Like one of them particularly is the whole masculine identity, which I just find so bizarre. This whole like real men eat meat. And that's a big one that I endured as well, was just that whole, like, you're not a man unless you eat meat. And that probably came from this whole thing that, like, this whole hunter-gatherer kind of ancestral living
times.
And I understand that. The reason why it was masculine to kill animals and eat animals 50,000 years ago is because your tribe were going to die and you had to provide sustenance. You had to protect those that you loved and you had to look after your kind first. And I understand that prerogative. My family is going to die unless I kill this animal. And that whole provider masculine thing is where I think that masculinity comes from. And it's such a masculine, manly thing to eat meat. And you're a soy boy or you're this weak thing if you don't eat meat. And the way I flip that whole narrative around is what it truly means to be masculine. And I don't associate, by the way, masculinity with being a man. I think females can display masculine traits as well as men can display feminine traits, being nurturing and kind and compassionate. They are what I would define as feminine traits. I define masculine traits as, even if you want to define them in that way, I just think it's being a human being. But if you did want to define and divide them in that way, I think true masculinity is I can show my strength in two ways. I can be strong by violating and killing the innocent. That's how I can show my strength and masculinity, or I can show my masculinity by defending the weak and innocent. And I truly believe that the masculine should protect the weak. The strongest in the yard can be the bully, or they can look after the one who's being the victim. And the police and the military, they can protect people, or they could literally use their guns and kill everyone. There's two ways that we can show our power. And I believe that I'll rephrase, I think the least masculine thing someone can do is pay for a little baby innocent animal to be bred and to be put into a cage and to be killed. Like, what is so manly about killing a little baby animal? Like, if I kicked a dog, people wouldn't say, what a manly thing you just did. Or if I killed and ate the dog, they wouldn't say, oh, you're such a man. They'd say you're a coward. Why are you killing this innocent, defenseless animal? So that you've asked a question, but I've answered in one context, and that is there is these identities that we're attached to. And there's also things like there's nostalgia as well. Like grandma might have made this chicken pie that when you eat a chicken pie, it reminds you of grandma. And there's that kind of
Yes, of
nostalgic
course.
kind of like, oh, I have to have chicken pie because it reminds me of this recipe that grandma used to make. And when I eat this chicken pie, it reminds me of her, and so I've spoken about masculine, I've talked about nostalgia, I will talk about culture and tradition. It's like, so I'm Italian, for example, and there's almost this thing that, like, if you don't eat things the way that it was passed down your tradition, you aren't proud of your culture. You're betraying your culture, your traditions. And there's lots of things that we can say that are traditional or cultural that are immoral. And I am proud of my Italian heritage. I'm proud of that. I'm very proud. But I don't want to pass down a tradition that is violent or oppressive. And I can still cook Italian food. I can still have pasta and pizza, but make it vegan. And I don't want to pass on traditions that are violent. So yeah, it's social pressure. It's being ridiculed. It's an optics problem. It's masculinity, or what people might feel how people may perceive them to be. It's also feeling like you're being inconvenienced. Like, again, that passed my mind as well. Oh, shit, when I go to people's house, they made me food, I have to refuse the food they made me. I need to request certain food. I need to do all this kind of stuff that makes it difficult for other people to accommodate me. And all of these stories go through your head, but I think it's culture, tradition, all of these kind of things that make it resistant, as you said, but I think the biggest thing is, as you mentioned, optics problem of what vegans actually are. And I think we're just normal people who just don't want to violate animals and exploit animals, and that's it. I do all the things that people do. I run, I exercise, I socialize, I go to the movies, I play tennis, I run up mountains, I go hiking, I do all the things that everyone does. But I also believe that I can't be or remain silent about this. I'm very passionate about injustice, so I will confront people and hold people accountable, because if I was doing something, if I was being racist or sexist or misogynistic, no one would say, oh, I'll just let Stefan do him and I'll let him be this racist, sexist, misogynistic person. I would hope that someone would hold me accountable and saying, what you're doing, how you're acting, how you're behaving has consequences, and there's victims behind your choices that you think are harmless. And probably the biggest one is what you mentioned earlier, is it's viewed as harmless because we see this meat in a packet, we see this product, and because they are literally seen as a product and not as an individual, it's just so disconnected that we don't see these slaughterhouses, we don't see these farms and as I'll just repeat it again, if you're listening, please look up Farm Transparency Project. They infiltrate farms and slaughterhouses around Australia. And I think if we are paying for things, we should at least know what we're paying for. We're not buying meat, egg and dairy. We're buying slavery, oppression, violence. And I just want to ask people, is that what you really want to be paying for? Yep.
Absolutely. And I think something that I wanted to add in there as well, and I'd love to get your opinion of this, is I think as well another cause for resistance is the way that I guess like vegan advocates are perceived, because there has been some like in the past and some in the present that are quite, I would say like maybe.
I know what you mean. Yep.
Yeah, I was like, how do I put this across? Very confronting. But even like I know, I can't remember her name, but there was one particular advocate that would cause damage like to certain like shops,
I think everyone would know her name.
like that.
Tash Peterson. Yeah. So she's done a lot of direct action, and again, a lot of people would agree or disagree with her methodology. Obviously, she gets a lot of attention. People might say the attention is bad press. Some people say it's good press because it brings it on. And there's mixed views. I have mixed views about it, even myself. As a supporter of her message, I have mixed views about it as well. You know, I see I see the positives in it, and I also see the negatives in it as well. And I understand both, that it would be having positive and negative effects, because a lot of people do message her and say, because of your videos, I've gone vegan. And a lot of people will say, because of your videos, I'm going to eat an extra bit of steak now. So it's going to make people, and again, it is that optics problem that it might contribute towards, as, you know, this is what veganism is, because she is probably the most prominent vegan in Australia. I think that some people might associate veganism with her. But again, I think what a lot of people need to learn is, what a lot of people have the problem doing is differentiating the message from the messenger. So if people could listen to the message rather than the messenger, then that's what we'd hope people would do. But it does work. It has worked for a lot of people. It also deters people further away as well. And I've experienced that conversation with people where when I do speak to people politely and respectfully, they say, "Oh, I thought, vegans were this, and you're not that person at all." So I personally prefer to have these direct, respectful, educational conversations, but I also understand and validate why she does what she does, because it is such an atrocity that if this were happening, again, if this were happening to dogs, people would support her completely. If she was saying, "You're murdering dogs," if she was screaming from a rooftop with a megaphone saying, "This place is evil, they put 5,000 dogs in a gas chamber a week," people would be like, "Yes, we love her passion. We love her fire." So if we were changing the victims in this situation, everyone would support her aggression, And it's just that we don't support her aggression because we're like, it's food. What's she talking about? She's telling us not to eat bacon. Why is she telling us not to eat bacon? Not to kill pigs. And that's what I'm saying. People would admire her passion if it was for another social injustice, like what's happening in Gaza, what's happening in Palestine, all that kind of stuff. If we were yelling for those kind of things, we'd like, yes, be that person. But because the victim isn't recognized as a victim, that's why she's seen as a menace, let's call it, by society. But if she was yelling and screaming about something that more people are on board with, she would be Australia's number one favorite person.
I think what I get stuck with sometimes, and this is for anything, this is an advocate for anything, is like, the way that you communicate is going to,
super important.
Yeah, and I feel like the way that you communicate, you want it to be heard, and there's ways to putting things out there where it's going to be resisted. And I would just hope that gets taken into account when anyone is advocating. But I think
how I speak about it is I'd like to speak to people as if it's the first time they've considered the subject. And how would I like to have been spoken about this for the first time? Would I have liked to have been yelled about it for the first time, or would I like to have been said, "Hey, look, I don't know if you're aware of this, but is this something you have thought of? Have you thought about the fact that how animals become food, clothing, and, their experience?" And that's how I like to do it. And for example, I always think about it as almost like the Trojan horse. If you start shooting a castle, they're going to shoot back. They're not going to put the drawbridge down. You have to be there. You have to be a friend with someone. They might put the drawbridge down, let you in the castle, and then you can actually have a respectful conversation. Whereas if you attack people from the start, their defenses go up. It's seen as a risk, because although it's an ego risk, it still is an attack and a risk, and your body will see that as a threat, and that person therefore is a threat and not a friend. And I'm not anyone's enemy when I speak about this. I'm trying to be your friend, and I genuinely think that speaking about this not only frees animals, it also frees the human. As you were saying, it frees you from being a part of a violent, oppressive system, and it frees you from doing something against your own, it's freeing you from doing something that you know that you don't want to do. And I don't think anyone wants to be violent towards animals, and it's freeing you from being someone who you're not.
Yeah, I mean, my tummy isn't nuts. It's telling me, it's yelling at me.
Sorry, not sorry.
No, but it's like, it's good though. Like these are the uncomfortable conversations that I like to have, even though I feel like bloody sick as, and I'm probably going to vomit after this, but it's really important. And I know that I need to challenge these things. Because if I don't question and challenge things, then I'm just kind of moving along and accepting things with how they are. I think we actually need to question things a bit more often rather than just accepting things for the way that they are. And I say that in a very large context.
And that's everything. That is everything. Like how we use plastic, how we recycle things, how we buy things, fast fashion.
We treat the planet. Yep.
Everything. There's so many issues that need to be spoken about and become, be brought into our awareness. The reason why I particularly focus about animal rights is it's something that is typically swept under the carpet. It's something that there's so many injustices in the world, but this is something that 99% of people are personally, individually responsible for.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Ugh, that just makes me sad.
Yeah.
Makes me sad. It really does.
I speak about it because I'm very passionate about it, because I've seen the result, and it hurts because I know I did it, and it hurts because it's just happening to 80 billion land animals every year and 1 to 2 trillion sea life every single year.
Why do we need so much? That's the other thing. We want too much. We are too greedy. Why? Why do we need all of this? It baffles me. Oh, it's crazy. It's crazy. Well, I wanted to actually move on to the next question, which I think is also another reason why people become a little bit resistant as well,
Yep.
is kind of the belief that humans are biologically designed to eat meat like in the first place.
Mhm.
So, do you think that's true? And if not, what do you think has led to this belief that we need animal products in our diets for survival and health?
So obviously, it's known that we have eaten meat in our ancestry. We've known to be both gatherers and, of course, hunters. So the fact that a lot of people will abide to that whole ancestral living thing, that we ate meat 50,000 years ago, therefore it's the most optimal thing to our food. And of course, it's true. We ate meat. And to be honest, I'm grateful that we killed and ate animals 30, 40, 50,000 years ago, because chances are we all would have been dead if we didn't. So it was essential to eat meat for our survival, because we didn't always have plant-based options available. There was fruits and vegetables out of season, so we actually had to kill animals to stay alive. So because we did it for our survival up until this point, I think that that's a valid reason to at least assume that because we did it, it's therefore necessary. But my argument is meat calories is always going to be better than 0 calories and starving. So eating for survival and eating for optimal health are two very different things. And what I'm most interested in is health outcome data. And as I mentioned a few studies earlier, yes, we can absolutely, some people argue we're carnivores, which I don't think we're carnivores. True carnivores can't get atherosclerosis. And I think that both physiologically and psychologically, we're not carnivores. We don't have claws. We don't have sharp teeth like lions or tigers. We have short intestines, not long intestines. We have all of the biological and physiological markers that lead closer towards herbivorism, so herbivores, frugivores. But we are omnivores. We can digest meat, but I would argue that it's not the optimal thing for our diet. It's almost like a car. You can put 91 or 98 unleaded. 91 is the meat, and 98 is the plants. And we definitely function better. I think psychologically, we're not carnivores either. We don't see an animal and say, I can't wait to chase down that animal and stick my teeth in it and eat the blood and the tendons and the bones and the ligaments and the brains and the testicles and the livers and the kidneys. I don't think a lot of us are carnivores in that sense. Again, in desperation, void of other options, I think we would become that person. We would become that violent, aggressive hunter. But we are not great hunters. We are only good hunters because of our brains, because of the tools we've created. We are terrible physiological hunters. We can't chase down animals. We can't claw them to death. We can't bite through their skin. We can't do any of that. We can only hunt because we have arrows and bows and spears and now guns. So we are, I'd say, intellectual hunters rather than physiological, biological, or psychological hunters. So to answer your question, I think the reason why we think it's necessary is because, yes, it kept us alive as humanity. Without meat, we all would have probably been dead, or a lot of us would have been dead or not alive if we didn't hunt and kill animals. But I think now that we have an abundance of plant-based options, which studies show are better for our health, I'm interested in health outcomes data, and I'm also interested in the impacts of my food when it comes to environmental and obviously ethical choices. So again, they didn't have studies in caveman days, but now that we have the studies to show that we can be 100% healthy on a plant-based diet, that proves that we don't need it, in my opinion. But I suppose we have these narratives that, you need to eat muscle to grow muscle, you need to eat meat to grow muscles. But some of the biggest herbivores out there, I mean, cows just eat grass and they become these huge animals without anything else. So we don't eat brains to grow brains or kidneys to eat, grow kidneys. So we don't need to eat meat to grow muscle, kind of thing. And on an interesting side note, I've actually interacted with lots of vegan parents recently who have kids who are 100% vegan, and they range anywhere. I've met parents, probably separate parents, but to probably about 8 kids who I've spoken to, who are 100% vegan kids, and they're anywhere from 6 months to 17 years old, and they have not eaten an animal product in their life, and they're completely healthy, smart, physically able, mentally able kids. So, that was just an interesting thought, and a little project I want to work on is actually interviewing both the parents and the kids in terms of the challenges they thought about what it would be like to raise a vegan kid and how the vegan feels about being raised vegan as well.
That is really interesting. Yeah, wow. And yeah, you shared a lot of really important information that I didn't even think about in respect to why we often assume that we are carnivores, or that, like, we have that physiological ability. Yeah, lots of really good points, things I didn't know about. So thank you so much, Stefan.
And the other, I'll just add one more quick thing. The other like stupid analogy is let's just say if all food sources were gone and all we had left was McDonald's, right? McDonald's was the only food source. We could probably live off McDonald's for 1,000,000 years, and our million year from now, people will be like, oh, McDonald's is the best, it's kept us alive for 1,000,000 years, so therefore McDonald's is good. And you know what? McDonald's probably would keep humanity alive for 1,000,000 years. It probably would. It would keep us alive enough to reproduce. It would keep us healthy enough. But just because we ate McDonald's for 1,000,000 years doesn't really mean that McDonald's is the best food. So we ate meat, but just because we ate meat doesn't mean it's the most optimal diet for our health. So yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, we've gained a lot more knowledge now at this point of time. So this is where I kind of think this is why we need to question things, like we're moving along, and just because something has worked or been accepted for so long doesn't mean that it's not something that we should continue doing. Like, we need to actually stop and reflect on all of these things, because we have grown, we have advanced, we've got more knowledge now. And I think it's just really important to question these things, look at it, reflect. I think that's what all I do now. All I do
Good.
is reflect.
It's good to be. A curiosity mindset is so important.
It is. Honestly, I'm very aware that I don't know everything, and I don't trust that everyone else knows everything either. Like, I feel like I need to also
I think that's 100% true.
Yeah. I think I need to follow my own gut instinct as well. Like, as it's telling me now, it's not feeling very good.
Yeah.
But I wanted to ask a little bit. It's really not feeling good. But I wanted to move into more around like food addiction and talk a little bit about that, because obviously, like, we are producing food in such huge masses now that it's everywhere. It's so available. We're no longer surviving. We are indulging. So food addiction, is such a real struggle. Do you think adopting like a vegan lifestyle can help someone shift away from using food as a crutch to manage emotions?
Well, as I mentioned, you can be a healthy and an unhealthy plant-based diet person. So you can still eat chips and Doritos and all that kind of stuff. I will also say that I know that eating and food is a very sensitive topic. People with eating disorders and things like that, and body image issues, which is something that fortunately I have not experienced. But I know that diet and conversations around food can be quite sensitive with food addictions and any addictions in general, particularly when it comes to eating disorders and things like that. So, any addiction can be difficult to break the cycle of, particularly if you've been doing something for, 20, 30, 40, 50 years. And there can also be those things that we were talking about earlier, like societal pressures, peer pressure, things like that. I think there's two parts that leads to addiction. There's more, but I think there's two main. And one is obviously our mental, psychological addictions, which is a major part in terms of our associations with certain foods, our belief systems, things like that. And a lot of our addictions actually come from not what we're craving necessarily, but what our gut microbiome is craving. So when it comes to, for example, giving up meat, and I actually experienced this as well. This is a personal story that I endured, that some vegans have said they haven't felt this at all. They just said they felt instantly better when they went plant-based. But truth be told, I actually had headaches for the first month that I went completely vegan. They were getting worse and worse and worse and worse. And I was actually starting to doubt myself. I was trying to think, oh, shit, can I do this? I've just removed all animal products and I'm starting to get headaches now. And the way I'd kind of describe what was happening was, one, it was probably psychological. I was thinking in my brain somewhere, because I had this food pyramid image in my brain, my brain was probably deeply subconsciously saying, you are not having very important meat, egg, and dairy in your life. And this is what you've taught you need to be healthy. And no wonder why you're getting headaches, because you're, omitting so many important healthy foods from your diet. But I think the stronger thing was, it's not what you're necessarily wanting, it's what your gut microbiome. And there are specific microbiome in your gut that are meat-eating bacteria. And I think what happens is, and I've read about this, is they start to die. because you're not feeding them their diet, and they start to release toxins as they die. And this has an impact on your body where you might think that you're feeling worse, but it's the fact that these meat-eating bacteria are starting to die off and they're releasing toxins because they're dying off. And it's almost like this signal to your brain saying, hey, give me this because I'm dying, and you mistake that for you needing it versus your gut microbiome needing it in terms of those particular ones. And the analogy I almost like to use is, I don't drink coffee myself, but a lot of people who have described to have been, addicted to coffee or regularly consume coffee, they might not have coffee for 3 or 4 days and they'll start feeling headachy and sick and weak and tired and all this kind of thing. And it's not like there's anything nutritionally essential in coffee. Like, coffee is absolutely not essential in any form whatsoever. But people feel like they're dying when they don't have coffee for 4 days. And that's kind of what I like to translate is if something so nutritionally unessential or non-essential as coffee can create so many detrimental, withdrawal symptoms, of course it's reasonable to assume that, giving up animal products might create the same withdrawal symptom complex of addiction. And I think a lot of these I think a lot of animal products are addictive behaviors. I think it's the biggest addiction. It's not, people think, coffee and sugar are addictive, and they are addictions, and smoking and alcohol, they're all addictions. But I think meat, egg, and dairy are also addictions that we can almost place in the same category. We're just addicted for many reasons, our psychological, social, I think there's a lot of factors here, at play.
Yeah, absolutely. And for someone who, I have had an eating disorder, I still struggle with the thoughts, but I don't listen to them anymore. I just kind of tune them out. That's taken a long time to get to that point. But one thing that I was thinking about, particularly for a plant-based diet, was a whole food plant-based diet.
There's a difference.
Let me,
Big difference.
let me mention that. Was thinking that it could then create a little bit more of a mindful approach to food. Yep. So that's where I kind of think, could that help in breaking down these addictions, because you're starting to view what you're ingesting in a much more different way. You're putting more thought into it. You're being mindful. I just think that in itself could have a real impact.
Yep, absolutely. And I think that, our relationship with our food is a reflection of our relationship with ourselves and vice versa. So I think that what you eat is, as with eating disorders, of course, is, what you eat and how you eat is definitely a reflection of your relationship with ourselves and therefore food. So, that's a really good point you make. And, I agree completely with what you said.
Thank you. So for someone who is interested in exploring a vegan lifestyle, how do you suggest they start the journey without feeling overwhelmed or guilty?
And look, it can be overwhelming, and I completely understand that, because once again, as I mentioned earlier, every feeling, this is a very valid feeling because I felt it too. For me, it was, as I mentioned, I transitioned from pescatarian, vegetarian, vegan. It wasn't because I didn't want to go vegan. I just thought that at the start when I was pescatarian, I thought, fish don't matter. That's why I was pescatarian. Then I went vegetarian again because I thought that dairy and eggs were harmless. And when I was vegetarian, I generally thought, great, I'm not harming animals anymore. So I thought I was doing the right thing. But in terms of taking the overwhelm out of this decision, there's a few strategies that I can recommend. And I think it's dependent on the person. It depends on where they're at mentally, physically, emotionally, financially. But there's plenty of resources, and it depends on whether, you're 20, 30, 40, 50, 60 years old as well, would also impact on, what stages, what steps can be done. There's lots of resources. There's lots of websites. One of them is called challenge22.com. They have plenty of resources. They actually have meal plans, diet plans, things like that. Another thing that I did initially when I went vegan was, let's just say if you like shepherd's pie, you can literally Google, how do I make vegan shepherd's pie? So all of your favorite recipes, let's say if you like chicken curries, what can I change the chicken with? You can do tofu, you can do tempeh, you can do beans, you can do lentils, you can do chickpeas. So, and a lot of the flavor, for example, in curries, we don't really have curries. The reason why curries are so delicious is because of the flavor. It's the plants in there that make it. The chicken adds a little bit of, obviously it has some positive nutritional content. I will never deny that. it adds a bit of texture. But you can replicate these things with tofu and chickpeas, and chickpea curries are great, tofu curries are great. So you just find the one thing in there that's an animal product, for example, the chicken, and you say, how do I replace the chicken part? Another really, not that I love it, but a resource that some people might align with is ChatGPT. You can actually type in ChatGPT, hey, I'm looking at becoming plant-based/vegan. And if you're concerned about things like iron or protein, for example, or zinc or magnesium or calcium, you can say, hey, look, you can type it in, you say, I want to be plant-based or vegan, but I'm really concerned about my calcium and my iron. I also love Italian and Indian food. Can you please make me a meal plan for the week? And ChatGPT will literally say, thank you for showing that you're concerned about calcium and iron. These foods are really high in calcium and iron. And here's a meal plan for the week. Here's some Thai recipes and Italian recipes for you. And it has the whole shopping list for you. It has all the recipes. And for some people, that would be a really great way to start, where if you are confused, and you can actually, as I mentioned, put in nutritional components of interest if you're concerned about things like protein or iron, or say like, I'm a gym goer and I really want to make sure I hit 150 grams of protein per day. And you can put in the targets that you want and it will hit them. Another one, of course, is seeing a plant-based nutritionist. That would be really helpful as well, and say, hey, look, I want to transition to being plant-based. Can you help me hit my targets? And obviously seeing a professional would be really helpful for that. There's great resources, as I mentioned before, great books like this, great podcasts. There's great Facebook pages and social media and Instagram pages and podcasts and all that kind of stuff. And sorry, one more strategy I like as well is, and this works for some people as well, who feel like a gradual process is better or more manageable or more sustainable for them, is commit to a week. So say this week here, I'm going to do 100% vegan breakfasts, and all your breakfasts have to be vegan, 100% vegan. And then next week, commit to 100% vegan lunches. And then the next week, 100% vegan dinners. And I think what happens with this strategy is, let's just say if you do the vegan breakfast week, after a week, you'll be like, oh, I just did that. And it was a little bit difficult. I had to think about certain things, but I made it, and I had 1 week of amazing vegan breakfasts, and then do the same for lunches. And what I will mention to people, because I experienced this too, was it is a little bit challenging for the first month because you're used to cooking in certain ways, you're used to eating in certain ways. But I've been vegan now for 6 years, and it's not like I now have to think, oh, how do I make vegan meals anymore? It's just, how do I make meals? So what used to be different and difficult and inconvenient and a little bit more challenging for literally a month, it's literally a month where you have to really think about, how do I do this? After that, I'm now 6 years vegan, and it's not any more thought process. It's just normal cooking. So one is obviously looking at the hows, and that's obviously the resources I mentioned. So Challenge 22, ChatGPT, Google, how do I make this vegan? Challenging yourself to a week, seeing a plant-based nutritionist. The other thing is what I did, and that was just, I don't know how to do this. It's connecting to not the how, but the why, and just being so like, I do not want to contribute to this problem. So I don't know how to do it, but I'm doing it. And it was just looking at documentaries. So you can look at, as I mentioned 3 times already, Farm Transparency Project. There's lots of documentaries like Dominion, which show, farming practices around Australia. And some people actually might connect with, although it's not what veganism is about, obviously veganism is about animal rights, but connecting to the environmental reasons and the health reasons can also help people transition as well. Because if you look at the impacts that it's having environmentally and also on your own health, that also might help. But ultimately, for me, it was respecting animals and respecting living in alignment with my own values was what made me connect to it, and empowering myself to do something despite not despite others doing things differently, but thinking. I think it's really empowering saying, like, I know that everyone else is doing things differently to me, but even despite all of these pressures, I'm doing something for me, and I'm doing something for the animals, and I'm doing something to live in alignment with my values. So, yeah, the hows and the whys and the whats are all important, but they're the different strategies that I would recommend.
Thank you so much. That was really, really helpful. And something I wanted to ask you as well, kind of on top of that, I know for me, when I've been on like a new journey or I'm moving on to a new path or a new direction, I do often look up what we call influencers on social media who are living the lifestyle that I would like to replicate. Is there any particular people that you would recommend for people to follow on social media?
There's plenty. So one of them, for example, is a female athlete called Sophia Ellis. And the great thing about her story, she actually had a significant eating disorder. And I think it was somewhere in the realm of 11 to 14 years ago is when she had an eating disorder. And she, believe it or not, then went vegan. She's now a British Olympic powerlifter, and she's got multiple European weightlifting, heavy lifting records. And again, from someone to come from an eating disorder to be a vegan powerlifter is quite phenomenal. So Sophia Ellis is her name. There's Nimai Delgado. He was raised vegetarian, so he's not eaten meat his entire life. I think he's about 35 years old now, and he's been vegan now for 11 or 12 years. But he was the first vegan to be on the front page of a fitness magazine. And he's completely natural and has won multiple bodybuilding competitions. Another guy is called Tor Washington. He is, I think, 50 to 55 years old, and he's been vegan now for 30 years, and his body is that of a fit 25-year-old. He looks incredible.
Wow.
And he, honestly, if you looked at it, they actually did street interviews where they showed pictures of his body to people in the street, and people were like, he's 30, he's 32. He's like, no, he's 55, and he looks incredible.
Oh my goodness.
There's Brian Turner, who's incredible, and I can share all these people. There's another guy called Jeff Palmer. He's 60, and he's been vegan for 40 years, and he is incredibly healthy. So there's plenty of names I can give. There's some I've given, but even if you look at things like the Game Changers documentary, there's plenty of people on there who are, of course, vegan athletes. So, and this is the thing I mentioned to people, if these people can compete athletically, on a plant-based diet, and I almost think about, there's only 2% of the world is vegan, and they're competing against 98% of the population, so it's almost like, in the Olympics, Australia is never going to win the Olympics because our population's too low. But if you look at the per capita rate of athletes, vegans are doing very well on the world stage for all sports, whether it's power sports, strength sports, in particularly endurance sports. Vegans per capita, per population, perform way better than animal product consumers.
I'm glad that you mentioned the Game Changer documentary, because that was actually the documentary that started making me think about going plant-based. This was years ago.
Yeah. I think it was like 2019, 2020. So it was about 5 or 6 years ago, I think.
Yeah. And I was still in active addiction at that point, but it still got me thinking. I was still playing sport at the time, not at my best ability, but it was still something that really resonated with me because I did really value my sport that I was doing, even though I wasn't really looking after my body in the way that I should have been. But as soon as I was learning about, how it can impact, your recovery time, building muscle, all of that, even just like the amount of fat that's in your blood, like everything, it was just so fascinating. So really good doco for people to check out, particularly like if you're quite invested in sports or bodybuilding or anything like that. And I've just been mindful of the time, so I might wrap it up here. But I did want to ask 2 more questions.
Sure thing.
This is more in alignment with like when you're moving into that lens of, becoming a vegan, and it's not just the diet, like it's the entire lifestyle change and, being very considerate on everything that you purchase and participate in. How does aligning with a compassionate and sustainable lifestyle contribute to a deeper sense of purpose in your experience?
Ultimately, the reason why I'm vegan is for selfless reasons, but I think there's also selfish reasons to be vegan. As we've mentioned, there's a lot of health benefits with the studies I've mentioned today. Some of them when it comes to mental clarity, physical strength and well-being and longevity. I think one of the biggest ones, although veganism isn't about the environment is obviously a selfish reason for us to be vegan as well. A very scary statistic, which overwhelms me incredibly, is out of 100% mammalian biomass on the world, only 4% are wild animals, and 30% are humans, and the remaining 66% are livestock.
That's insane.
So what that means, if people think about this, 96% of all mammals on Earth are either humans or pretty much the 6 or 7 species of animals that we breed to become slaves and food. So
that's crazy.
It's scary. So that means 2/3, 66% of all mammalian life on Earth is bred to be killed, to be food, to be a product, to be a commodity. That means 2/3 of all life on Earth are slaves, and they're innocent slaves. I mean, obviously slaves are innocent, but they're these beautiful animals. And what that means is, and if you think about this, as I mentioned, with that kind of pie chart in your mind of 100% of animals, only 4%, this much, is wildlife. And the other 96% is like, what, 7 or 8 species of animals in terms of mammals.
That's so sad.
And
that's horrible.
If you think about biodiversity, if you think about the problems of non-biodiversity, this is completely non-sustainable. And we've just turned the Earth into a farm. And I actually want to read a couple of stats here, which are just phenomenally disturbing. 80% of all agricultural land is for livestock. And this 80% of land only yields 17% of calories consumed by humans. So I'll repeat that again. 80% of all agricultural land is for livestock. That 80% of land only gives 17% of our calories, because obviously we have to feed lots of food to animals to only get a little bit of food back. That 80% of yield for 17% of calories only gives us 38% of the protein that we need. And that is obviously a very wasteful and inefficient food system. Meanwhile, plant agriculture uses 18% of the land, but gives us 83% of calories consumed by humans. So 80% of animals gives us only 17% of calories. Literally reverse that for plants. Only 17% of land gives us 83% of calories and 62% of our protein. There was a study by Dr. Joseph Poore. I can't remember if it was Oxford or Harvard University, but it was a study in 2018, and he said we would free up, I think it was 75% of our land if we went from an our current climate, which is obviously a mix of animal and plant-based, to just plant-based. We'd free up 75% of our land. And we would be able to restore so many ecosystems. We'd have less antibiotics, less viruses, less pollution, less ocean dead zones, less deforestation, less gas emissions, and so many more environmental impacts, which again directly impacts us. So what I'd always say is, a lot of people say, we're killing animals with what we're doing, but potentially the way we're living now, by still farming animals, we're killing humans because we are ruining our environment. We're potentially killing, if we keep using this planet in the unsustainable way that we're currently doing, we're killing animals right now, but we're probably killing the equivalent of me and your grandkids right now. We're probably killing our own grandkids right now. So it is a human issue, and we're actually killing a lot of these third world countries who are, we use third world food to feed our first world meat. So people are worried about humanitarian issues, but a lot of people don't realize the link between animal agriculture and killing humans, both for environmental pollution and things like that, and ocean dead zones. And the more we kill our oceans and our forests, the more we're killing us. So I think the more that we continue in this trajectory, we're not only killing animals, we are killing probably the equivalent of humans in 1 or 2 generations' time. People who are born probably now, we're probably killing right now.
Yeah, and I agree with that, because, I mean, you can see even just in the way that, people's health has really started to deteriorate even further, like just from the environmental factors, the way that our foods are being produced, like everything, it all plays a part. And you just see a lot of humans becoming sicker and sicker and sicker, like the rise of...
Yeah, there's a lot of reasons.
Absolutely, there is. But there's so many contributing factors, and I hate the way that the world is operating right now. Like we're only making things worse for, not only for animals but for ourselves too. Yep. How do we change it? Like, how do we?
There's conversations and more conversations, hopefully. Yeah. We're talking about one issue, but of course there's so many more issues that I'm passionate about as well. But this is definitely a big one.
Yeah, we can obviously start making our individual choices, but would love to see what could happen on a bigger scale, but maybe we'll save that conversation for another day. Yeah. All right, well, to wrap it up, what would you say to someone who maybe disagrees with your statements and believes they need animal products in their life?
Yeah, I would say look up the literature I've suggested. Be open-minded, be curious. I'd be more than happy to share any of the resources that I've been talking about, plus so much more. I mean, I've been diving deep into obviously the ethics side, but particularly the nutritional and the health and the environmental impacts of being vegan or being plant-based. I'd be more than happy to have a chat with anyone. But yeah, I'd just encourage people to be open-minded and look into the literature. Yeah, I don't really have much more to say than that. But yeah, we'll keep that one short.
Perfect. Yeah. That's good. And is there any place that anyone can find like your advocacy work? Sorry, on Facebook or Instagram?
Yeah.
Where do they?
So there's a few. Again, I will mention it for the fourth time. I'd really recommend looking at the Farm Transparency Project. They are probably my favorite resource. They have a website, they have a Facebook page, and they have Instagram. That would be my number one place to go. My personal page, I mean, I have a personal page, Stefan Testi. I post a lot on that. I'm trying to bring up my vegan specific page, which is called Peas Full Vegan, which is peas as in PEAS, FULL vegan, Peas Full Vegan, which I have an Instagram and Facebook page, which isn't that active at the moment, but I want to start increasing that.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much for coming on today, Stefan. I really appreciate it so much. And yeah, this was a really insightful conversation. I actually learned a lot more than, I mean, I know you're insightful, but my goodness, I learned way more than I knew, and I'm grateful for that. So thank you for teaching me today.
And I really appreciate, of course, the opportunity to speak up about this topic, which, of course, I'm very passionate about, and obviously give a voice, hopefully, to the animals that people can listen to and at least consider.
Thank you so much. All right. Well, thank you for coming on, and I'll speak to you soon.
Sounds good. Thank you, Paris. You're a legend.
Bye.
Bye-bye.